Part 187. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1861. Man Bao looked up to the sky and laughed. Bai Erlang shrank his neck and did not speak. It happened that a servant came from behind and said, "Master, Miss Man, Master Tang, Mr. Zhuang asked the servant to tell you that he would also go out of the city to relax together, and let you wait for him. He will come after changing his clothes." When Mr. Zhuang came slowly from his yard, the servants also prepared their tea sets, mats, meals, and even desserts and fruits. Just these things are loaded into a car. Of course, Mrsgn also baked a basket of cakes for them. There were dried lotus leaves at the bottom of the basket. She baked one and threw one in. Thinking about so many things, one cake per person is almost enough, because Yin or when she came with Lu Huan, upholding the principle of having more guests, she branded 2 more pieces and threw them in. At this moment, the cakes were steaming hot, and the aroma kept coming out of the covered basket. Yin or couldn't help but set his eyes on the basket. He is still like this, let alone a few Manbao who have been eating Xiao Qian's cakes since childhood. Manbao took the basket almost immediately. "Then let's go, thank you sister-in-law." Xiao Qian said with a smile, "If it's cold when you want to eat at noon, then heat it up in a pot." That was impossible. Only a few people went out. Manbao and the others pushed the horses to Daji and other guards together, and then sat on the carriage together to share the meat patties. Because the cake was still very hot not long after it came out of the pot, Manbao and the others tore off a corner of the lotus leaf and used it to pinch the cake and eat it. "Yin," he said while taking small bites, "it's not good, it's not even noon yet." Bai Erlang was in a car with him, and when he heard the words, he looked at the cake in his hand. "Don't bite when you say this." Yin or took small bites, ignoring him. But he didn't dare to eat too much, for fear of accumulating food. After all, he had breakfast in the palace in the morning. Mr. Zhuang didn't dare to eat too much. As he got older, he couldn't get too full. After eating carefully, he took out his handkerchief and wiped his hands. Then he looked at Zhou Man and Bai Shan, and said, "Eat less. So, you should have breakfast in the morning, right?" Manbao responded, but after eating one, she still stretched her claws to the basket. She said, "Sir, it's been an hour since breakfast now." Bai Shan also nodded, took the last one, and said, "Sir, we are growing." Mr. Zhuang glanced at them and took out a bamboo tube from the side to give them. "There is warm water in the bamboo tube to quench their thirst." Bai Shan took it with a smile, thanked Mr. and handed it to Manbao. Manbao took a sip of water and took another bite of the pancake. His eyes were bright and he was very happy. Mr. Zhuang looked at him and shook his head slightly. "It's good to be young, especially at the age of 10. There's nothing in this world that they can't eat." Daji drove the car in front and sent them directly to the wild. At the foot of the mountain, there are a few people who go out for an outing. Fortunately, the place is big enough to stay anywhere. Knowing that they were looking for wild vegetables, he deliberately found a good place for them to stay. After getting out of the car, the 3 of Manbao raised their eyes and found that the place was indeed a good place, and there was the wild vegetable they were looking for not far from their feet. Manbao stepped forward and folded it. Bai Shan brought out a basket for her. Yin or and Lu Huan gathered around curiously to see, "Is this a wild vegetable?" "Yeah, actually, when I still eat wormwood, the wormwood made by my sister-in-law is also delicious." Yin or blinked and asked, "A wormwood? Isn't that medicine?" Manbao laughed, "It's also a vegetable. In this world, 100 herbs can be used for medicine, and 100 herbs can also be used for cooking. Whether it is medicine or cooking depends on how you do it." The wormwood Lu Huan still knew it. He folded a bud from the side, put it on the tip of his nose and smelled it, and immediately took it away with disgust. "Is this thing delicious?" Man Bao simply picked some and put them in the basket. Go back and let my sister-in-law make it for you. Bai Erlang also brought up the basket and pointed directly to the green grass and fields at the foot of the mountain. Let's go there to find it, there are more weeds in the fields. Man Bao and Bai Shan thought so too, so after greeting Mr. Zhuang, they took Yin or Lu Huan to find them together. These two really don't know wild vegetables, even the vegetables are now recognized, let alone wild vegetables. Fortunately, there are only those kinds of wild vegetables that the president has in the field at this time. After the three of Man Bao found it, one of them stuffed one into their hands and asked them to take a control to find it. Yin he just took the wild vegetables and compared them around. After a long time of searching, he managed to find one. After he picked them, he looked at the three of Man Bao happily. Seeing Man Bao stepped forward and broke or dug up the vegetables not far from his feet, he also said to him, by the way, don't dislike people who are young and don't want them, it's just tender, the one you folded is too old, but it can be used. Yin Or looked at what she dug up in her hand, and then looked at what she folded in her own hand, and really couldn't see anything in common between the two, except that they both had leaves. Yin Wei thought that he had made a mistake, but after reading it back and forth a few times, he couldn't help but ask, should I dig the roots of this plant? No, its roots can't be eaten, but this one can. Yin Or, after a long time of trouble, they are not the same kind. Yin he spread out the wild vegetables that he was making as a sample, and after searching for a while, he found a plant that was almost the same. He took it out and asked, why didn't this plant have its roots dug up? Because it's not easy to dig, Man Bao said confidently, you see this plant is right under the ridge, the soil is very loose, and it comes out when you dig it lightly. Stop digging. Yin Or, is it so casual? Man Bao nodded, and then told him with practical actions that there was something more casual. If the leaves felt bad, they folded them on the spot. They felt that they were too old, so they only pinched the most tender parts on the top, completely disregarding the feelings of the wild vegetables, leaving most of the remains in the soil. The five of them walked further and further down the ridge. The fields were full of wild vegetables. Lu Huan had already recognized the difference between wild vegetables and weeds. He stepped on a field and pointed to a green road inside. Look, the weeds here seem to grow exceptionally well, why aren't there any wild herbs? The three of Man Bao heard the sound and turned their heads to look, but stopped talking for a while. Bai Erlang looked at him speechlessly and said, that's not grass, that's wheat. Bai Shan said directly, as a son of an official, stepping on a wheat field, be careful of being impeached. When Lu Huan heard this, he jumped out of the field in fright. As a result, there was half a shallow dimple on the ridge. He didn't stand firm, and sat on the ground with his buttocks. When the four of them saw it, they immediately burst into laughter. Lu Huan got up from the ground, patted his butt, pointed at Bai Shan and said, you scare me. Bai Shan laughed and said, I didn't scare you, you forgot why Wang Ji was impeached last time. Lu Huan shook and immediately moved further away from the wheat field, but he couldn't help but be curious. He crouched on the edge of the field and looked, this is wheat, it looks like weeds. Oops, I didn't expect it to be so late, I almost didn't change. It's too late, everyone must be asleep, good night. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1862. Man Bao looked at it carefully and asked, where's the resemblance? It's completely different, okay. Yin Or also stared at the wheat field, and thought to himself, it doesn't look like it, and it looks like it everywhere, okay. The two followed the three of them in a daze and walked through the field, picking 3 baskets of wild vegetables before giving up. The servants of the Bai family had already spread out mats on the grass. When they came back with baskets, tea and snacks were placed on the mats. Mr. Zhuang was sitting cross-legged on the mats blowing the spring breeze, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he couldn't be more comfortable. Hearing the noise, he opened his eyes and glanced at them, shook his head slightly, and took a sip from the teacup. Man Bao put the basket on the grass and sat directly next to the husband. The cow drank a cup of tea before asking, "Sir, are you not going to play?" Mr. Zhuang shook his head, and he wanted to go out for a walk. Even if he stepped on the green grass, he would feel comfortable sitting and enjoying the wind. There was no need to make himself uncomfortable. A few people saw that Mr. didn't play with them, so they went by themselves. Man Bao saw that there were a lot of wildflowers at the foot of the mountain, so he stepped forward and pulled some thin vines with flowers, and then weaved them awkwardly. This is what she and Lejun and the others learned, but unfortunately she doesn't always learn very well. Seeing that she was so clumsy, Bai Shan simply took things over and weaved them around for her. Bai Erlang dug out a nest of ants from the ground. Lu Huan screamed in fright, and stepped back again and again. Bai Erlang couldn't help laughing. Yin Or glanced at Ant, turned his head in reluctance, and walked away with slightly shaking shoulders. Walking over to Bai Shan and Zhou Man, he glanced at the grass, hesitated for a while, but just like them, he lifted his robe and sat on the grass. Bai Shan was weaving the basket, and Man Bao turned around again and continued to pull the vines, and also pulled a lot of flowers back to decorate him. Yin Or was surprised. "You still do this?" Bai Shan pointed to Man Baodao. "She often did this when she was a child. I'll know it if I see it more." Man Bao smiled and said, "You obviously learned with me when you were young." Naturally, Bai Shan's compilation was not as good as Zhou Lejun's and the others. He looked at it, and felt a little disgusted with it, so he handed the flower basket to Man Bao. Man Bao put all the vines in his hands between the three of them. "Make a few more, and we'll go pick flowers later." Bai Shan said while editing, "People are growing well on the branches, why do you have to pick them?" Man Bao said, "Have you cut off any flowers and plants since you were a child?" When Yin he saw the two of them, he quarreled. He simply took the flower basket beside Zhou Man and turned around and went to pick flowers and play by himself. It is rare for a group of people to go out for an outing. Although the scenery in the palace is not bad, it feels completely different. Here, they can relax and lean on the mat, drowsy with the spring breeze, but in the palace, sitting on the railing unruly and shaking their legs is disrespectful. Even Yin Or all relaxed and lay drowsy on the mat after the meal, but Mr. Zhuang simply fell asleep and snored. Man Bao and Bai Shan were sitting on the side of Mr. Zhuang's head, just enough to cover the spring sun for him. With a fan on his face, he slept soundly. Bai Erlang didn't sleep either. He was playing some small games with Lu Huan. The two of them laughed from time to time. Back home, Qian Shi and others stayed with Yin or had dinner with Lu Huan before going back. It's impossible to eat dinner, but it's okay to eat something and go back. Xiao Qian took two sisters-in-law to clean up the wild vegetables, directly boiled boiling water to scald the wild vegetables, then chopped them and mixed them, and it was ready in less than 3/4 of an hour. She also fried some side dishes along the way, and then served them the cooked porridge. It's the best to eat wild vegetables mixed with white porridge. You can try it. Yin Or and Lu Huan took a small pair of chopsticks. Seeing that Bai Shan and the others were already eating gracefully but with big mouthfuls, they ate the food on the chopsticks. Some sour, some sweet, green, and crunchy. There is a crunching sound when I take a bite, saliva secretes involuntarily. Yin Or just lowered his head and took a mouthful of porridge. Seeing that the two of them had great appetites and started to eat the second and third chopsticks, Xiao Qian couldn't help laughing, and said, "I have done a lot. Do you want to take some home with you two young masters later? If the appetite is not good, then just eat it with a pair of white porridge." Yin Or thought that her grandmother was old and her appetite was indeed not very good, so she nodded and put down her chopsticks to thank. Then it's better to be respectful than to obey. "Thank you, Mrs. Zhou." Seeing that he had taken it, Lu Huan also responded. Seeing that they liked it, Xiao Qian couldn't help but feel happy. She also picked out some of the best ones and wanted to leave them to the princess. As a result, when Chu Yulang came back in the afternoon, he heard it and said, "It's for the princesses, how can I stay overnight?" He said to Xiao Qian, "Sister-in-law should also cook the rest of the wild vegetables." My elder brother and I went out to pick them early in the morning. After picking them, my sister-in-law can make them in a quarter of an hour, and Man Bao can go out with them. Man Bao peeled an orange and ate it. It was stored in the ice cellar by Mrs. Lu last year. She can still eat it now. Thursday Lang said, "It's not the first day of the new year, you don't need to go to the great court, don't you?" Man Bao nodded, "But Chang Yu won't mind." Thursday Lang said solemnly, "The princess won't mind, and we can't neglect the princess." Man Bao looked at him suspiciously, when did he become so considerate and enthusiastic? "It's not the first day I know that she is good with the two princesses. The last time I heard that she brought steamed meat into the palace for the princesses to eat, and asked her to eat more. Don't always think about people." Seeing her strange eyes on Thursday, Lang approached her and whispered, "I heard Lejun say that Princess Changjia wants to do business with our family." Man Bao, fourth brother, "What do you want to do with Princess Changjia's name?" "I don't want to do anything," said Thursday Lang in a low voice. "Am I going to go out to the grassland? If we have the princess participation, the journey will be much easier. Call the princess, and I will go to the city and town in the future, so I won't encounter something like Liang Zhou again." "Right," Thursday Lang said. "As for me, I don't want her to contribute, we will give her how much she contributes." "How many shares do you take, and only use her name, what do you think?" Man Bao frowned and asked, "Is my name useless?" "Fourth brother, did you go into medicinal herbs? Don't do anything bad. Although Zhou Man is young and has low qualifications, if she collects medicinal materials, her name will be better than that of Princess Changjia." Thursday Lang said, "Nonsense, am I someone who does bad things? But apart from the medicinal materials, this time I went to the grasslands, I also want to collect some other things. For example, the pearls in the grasslands," said Thursday Lang. "I heard Aludun say that their tribe used to have a big lake not far away, and there were many mussels under the lake, which produced many pearls every year, and many people went to the lake every year. Pearls are collected there, but ordinary merchants can't go back to the central plains even if they collect pearls, not to mention the horse thieves along the way, and there are many towns passing by, most of which were bought by force in the towns in front." See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1863. Man Bao was startled. "Pearl? Does our family have this capital?" On Thursday, Lang smiled and said, "Of course there is. Last year, those cattle and medicinal materials made a lot of money. I have always been with Lejun." Man Bao frowned. "Why did you think of starting a pearl business? This precious thing is not easy to touch." Thursday Lang said, "Bai Wu proposed, he wanted the two to work together, but I refused." He smiled and said, "I know what they think, but I just want to use your momentum to catch up with other people in the palace, so that this business can be done more solidly." Man Bao looked at him suspiciously. "You don't want to take them with you?" Thursday Lang shook his head. "No, I don't think their family is very authentic. It's okay for everyone to drink, eat, and occasionally help each other a little. This kind of deep financial exchange is unnecessary." Zhou Lejun drifted by, and after hearing the words, he paused and said, "Not to mention that our family is weak, it's too unsafe for this kind of business to be involved with them." Thursday Lang nodded. "That's right, I'd rather suffer a little bit myself than give so much money to others." Zhou Lejun simply stopped and said to Zhou Man, "Sister-in-law, I won't allow fourth uncle to do the pearl business now. Pearls are too expensive and the risks are too high." Zhou Hulang hurriedly said, "Do you know how much a bunch of pearls are worth? If the quality is better, it is almost comparable to our 10 carts of goods, the cost of escorting 10 carts back and forth, and the cost of bringing only one bunch of pearls. The cost of... But if you encounter danger on the road, 10 cars may return one, and none of the pearls you want to bring may be returned." Thursday Lang smiled and said, "You have never traveled far after hearing this. If you encounter a horse thief, will they let you get away from a carriage? On the contrary, pearls are easy to carry. If you take them, you can run. Even if you can't run with a bunch of them, you can take pearls with good quality close to your body. As long as you run back, you won't lose a lot." Zhou Man lifted his eyelids and glanced at Thursday Lang and asked, "Fourth brother, how much do you plan to spend to buy pearls, and how much do you plan to use for medicinal materials, fur, cattle, and sheep?" Shiro touched his nose and said, "You know, our family doesn't have a lot of money. The reason why I want to change to pearls is that pearls are easy to carry, and secondly, pearls can make a lot of money, so I think I can buy 80% of them. Pearl, the remaining 20% will be replaced with medicinal herbs." Man Bao refused directly, "I don't agree, you have to do it the other way around. Thursday Lang, it's said that this pearl earns a lot of money. Fourth brother, in terms of making money, is there any business in this world that is more profitable than gold and copper mines?" Man Bao interrupted him, "However, do you dare to do it?" Thursday choked. Man Bao said with a solemn face, "In addition to gold mines and copper mines, there are also salt, iron, and grain transportation. Do you dare to earn this money?" Thursday Lang said, "What dare you not?" Man Bao said to Zhou Lejun, "Have you read the book The Richest Man in Daming that I showed you last time?" Zhou Lejun immediately regained his energy and nodded again and again, "I've read it early, Auntie, I have made a lot of annotations. Would you like to help me check what I'm thinking wrong?" Man Bao agreed, "I'll show it to you when I look back. You give the book to the fourth brother first, and let him read it." Thursday Lang shrank, swallowed, and asked, "Me, I read." He can recognize some characters well, and can write some simple basic characters, but he can read books. If he can read books, does he need to carry a Zhou Lejun or Zhou Lizhong and Zhou Liwei everywhere? Zhou Lejun had already run back to the house and pulled out a book, which she very preciously carried to Shiro, and warned, "Fourth uncle, you have to be careful, a book is very expensive." Shiro hugged the book in his arms, neither pushing it, nor accepting it. Man Bao said, "When you finish reading this book, you will know why I didn't agree." She sighed like Mr. Chuang, then raised her head and said earnestly, "Fourth brother, I am here for your own good." Thura. Although Zhou Lejun, who had already read the book, agreed, but seeing her aunt so inscrutable, she couldn't help but stay silent for a while with her fourth uncle. She didn't have the patience of my sister-in-law, so she solved the mystery directly, "Fourth uncle, sister-in-law, this is to save the lives of you and our whole family." Thursday Lang hugged the book tightly and said, I just want to try the pearl business, do I need to scare me like this?" Bai Shan, who had been reading silently on the side, suddenly said meaningfully, "Brother Thursday, people's desires cannot be filled, so people need to be satisfied." Man Bao nodded and said, "In the beginning, because you were poor in our family, the reason why we went to the county to sell things was to pay your debts." Thursday Lang was so tired, he didn't deny the latter point, but the former point, how could he tell Man Bao that their family was not rich before? Why did she always think their family was rich before he lost the bet? "When my family started growing vegetables and making tofu, I didn't even think about buying a shop in the county town, and I didn't even think about going to Yazhu City and other counties and towns," Man Bao said. "You started reselling wheat seeds, have you ever thought about coming to the capital to do the business of medicinal materials in the future? When you brought the medicinal materials to the capital, did you ever think that you would do a fur business in the future, and would you also go to the grassland to sell cattle and buy medicinal materials? Thursday was silent. Man Bao said, just like last year, have you thought that you will be in the pearl business this year? So you can't think of what business you will do in the future today. Thursday Lang couldn't help but muttered, naturally, do whatever business makes money. Seeing Man Bao staring, afraid that she would mention gold, copper, and salt and iron again, he hurriedly said, of course I'll do the business that I can come across. If I have the ability to do the salt and iron business in the future, you say I'll make money from it. Is your business pushed out? Bai Shan frowned. They discussed business affairs not long ago. He glanced at Zhou Man, who was choked, put down the book in his hand, got up from the stone bench and walked over. Fourth brother, I think in this world there are 4 kinds of people. One is only able to see between square inches, only his feet are in front of him, and one day is one day, and they have the most simple wishes. The second type is to be able to see inside a room, to think about the future for yourself and your family, but they don't know much, so the consideration is not deep. The third type is to be able to see between a county and a prefecture, and to think about the country and the livelihood of the people. And the fourth type is the saints from ancient times to the present. What they think is the whole world. A word today may be able to bless people 1,000 years from now. After thinking about it for a while, Shu Yulang thought he was right, so he asked enthusiastically, then who do you think I am? Thursday brother is the first. Thura. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1864. Shiro's eyes were slick, and he even nodded when he saw her. Zhou Hulang was immediately dissatisfied, and said, let's not talk about Man Bao. My family can't compare to her, but among our brothers, I'm the smartest, right? Who knew that? Bai Shan shook his head and said with a smile, Thursday brother, none of the brothers is stupid, but everyone has their own strengths. If you want me to say, besides Man Bao, only your aunt is the wisest. Not only can you see inside a house, but you can also see outside. Man Bao nodded fiercely, repeatedly agreeing. Seeing that Shai Zuolang was not convinced, Bai Shan said, Brother Shushu, since you left our village, you have been pushed away by your own desires and the people around you. When you are lucky, you can be smooth, but when you are bad, if it fails, it will overturn. This is because you can only see between the square inch, and you cannot see the danger or the opportunity beyond the square inch. I'll just ask you 4 questions. Will this one of yours be distributed as a merchant in the future? Shura, who had never thought of breaking up, widened his eyes. Thursday Lang continued to ask a second question, if someday someone pays 10,000 taels of gold and asks you to transport salt and iron out of customs, will you be lucky or not? Shu Yulang wanted to directly say that he was unlucky. Is he the kind of person who sells his country for wealth? Man Bao felt in his sleeve, took out a golden ingot and placed it in the palm of Shirulang's hand, about 2,000 ingots of this kind of gold. Thursalang held Jinzi and swallowed, unable to speak. Bai Shan smiled, looked at Man Bao and continued to ask a third question, if one day the imperial court wants to forcibly expropriate your property and move you to another place, will you or not? Thursday Lang asked directly, why did the imperial court relocate me? For your money and power, Bai Shan said, even an aristocratic family can be relocated, let alone your concubine. Thuro frowned, feeling uncomfortable for the first time. Bai Shan asked, the last question, what should you do if your descendants want to take the imperial examinations in the future? Thursday Lang was stunned. He didn't know much. He didn't understand what Bai Shan said about forcibly expropriating his property and migrating him away from his hometown, but he still knew that the son of the merchant couldn't take the imperial examination. Bai Shan nodded at the book in his arms and said, although what is written in the book is not to be believed, it is the thinking of the ancestors and the wise, and it has some merits. Brother Thursday may wish to read it, no one has far-sighted. There must be near-term worries, you can try to look further afield and know what you want to leave behind in the future, so that you can determine the path you want to take now. Man Bao nodded again and again, and seeing that he was still holding her gold, he took it out forcefully and stuffed it into his sleeve. Shiro couldn't help but follow Jin's eye, frowning and asked, how can you put the gold in your sleeve? What if it falls? Man Bao said firmly, it won't fall. Then you can't put it on your body. What if you get robbed? Thursday Lang said, you don't have a big use. It's enough to bring copper coins when you go out on weekdays. Man Bao nodded perfunctorily, I know, fourth brother, when have I ever lost money? If I hide money, sometimes even I can forget where I hid it, and no one else will be able to find it. Thura. She set her eyes on the book in his arms and said, don't change the subject, go back and read the book, and ask Liz Hong if you don't know the words. There are many family members, and Ligzhu and Ligu go to and from school every day. At home, you can ask them. This is a storybook in the encyclopedia, which tells the legendary story of how a man in a country called Daming started from nothing to become the richest man in a country. He has done a lot of things in his life, there are good things, and there are many bad things, but in the end he didn't die from the bad things he did, but from the jealousy of the emperor and the jealousy of officials. Man Bao meaningfully said to Thursday Lang, take a good look and experience his last psychology. Thursday Lang watched them turn away with an inexplicable look on his face, and he also heard Lejun ask, little aunt, are you trying to make the fourth uncle compare yourself to Shen Wanzan? Man Bao shook his head, how can the fourth brother compare to him? So if he doesn't understand the truth, he will be worse than Shen Wanzan, and then if I am his sister, you are her niece, etc., will be implicated, don't even think about it. Zhou Lejun, sister-in-law, you actually scare me. Although I don't study much, I also know that the crime is not enough to marry a daughter. We are all married. What does it have to do with us? Take it down, these statements are all lying to you. The emperor was angry and directly involved the three clans, you see if we are among them. Zhou Lejun, it's scary. Bai Shan smiled and said, don't scare people, except for treason and treason, other crimes will not implicate the three clans. Zhou Lejun breathed a sigh of relief. Man Bao asked quietly, then your parents, your brothers are implicated, do you feel bad? Zhou Lejun, sister-in-law, if you have something to say, just say it. Man Bao said, take care of your money a little bit. Large expenditures must be approved by the whole family at a meeting. You can't let the fourth brother come as he wants. Man Bao remembered something and asked, by the way, is the fourth brother's private money also with you? Zhou Lejun was taken aback and looked left and right, but didn't find the fourth aunt, so he asked in a low voice, little aunt, how did you know? Man Bao is complacent, is there anything else in this family that she doesn't know about? She didn't need Keek's help, she could figure it out with her toes. I heard the fourth sister-in-law and the eldest sister-in-law say that she was looking through the fourth brother's things, but the fourth brother didn't have a few cents in total, and even the fifth brother in our family knew how to do it. Hiding the money from the private house, can the fourth brother hide it? The fourth sister-in-law can't find it, the money must not be in the fourth brother's hands, and he didn't hide it for me, it must be hidden for you. Since Man Bao entered the palace, Zhou Lizhong and Zhou Legu both took out half of the money and hid it by themselves. Just because they were afraid that Man Bao would be in the palace again when they needed money urgently, they could only be in a hurry. Not to mention Thursday Lang, who took the money early, she thought at first that he was handed over to the fourth sister-in-law for safekeeping. Zhou Lejun breathed a sigh of relief and whispered, the fourth uncle's private house is not much money, Auntie, don't tell the fourth aunt, or they will definitely quarrel. Man Bao nodded, I'm not stupid. Her father hid private money, and she didn't tell her mother. Of course, she didn't tell her father about the private money that her mother hid, he. Man Baodao, I also pay attention to his private house money, and he is not allowed to spend a lot of money. Zhou Lejun, it's not good, the money is not mine, I just keep it for me. You just ask him if he has finished reading the book, and if he has finished, ask him his final thoughts. Zhou Lejun responded with a smile. At the entrance of the garden, Zhou Lejun went to the garden, while Man Bao and Bai Shan turned to the study in front. Bai Shan smiled at her and said, Thursday brother and Princess Changjia, does it seem that you have affection and I have intentions, and I am in the middle of it? Man Bao understood what he meant and said solemnly, they won't have a good outcome. I don't want to add more today, I want to eat all kinds of delicious food, so I will add it tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1865. Bai Shan nodded. The two entered the study. Bai Shan saw that her book basket was still on the table, so he helped him organize it. When he saw a scroll in it, he looked at Man Bao, what is this? It's a small portrait painted by Mingda for Chang Yu. Bai Shan didn't open it, but put it aside, took out the other things in the book basket, and asked with a smile, why did you want to draw a small portrait? Did you draw it too? No painting, this is for Wei Yu to see, Man Bao said, by the way, let's go find Wei Yu tomorrow, and you can also draw a small portrait of him, and I will bring it in for Chang Yu. Bai Shan is confused, what is this operation? Didn't they meet? More than once. Man Bao smiled and said, although I have seen it, I didn't take a closer look. I have seen it only a few times, so it's hard to stare at each other. Chang Yu has almost forgotten what he looks like. Bai Shan, the old man sat across from her, I've seen it several times, can I forget it? But he still agreed, and the next day he followed her to the Wei family to find Wei Yu. Wei Yuki entered the Kuazijian, and is still adjusting to it, and has no particularly good classmates, so Xiumuri writes and draws at home alone. When he learned that Bai Shan and Zhou Man were visiting, he immediately greeted him. He was dressed in homely moon-white clothes, looked very casual, and had an air of comfort. After inviting people into the study, he said with a smile, I have few friends in the capital, and I have never forgotten them when I saw them last time, and I still think about when they will have them. It's good time to invite you out for a party, but I didn't expect you to come to the door before I invited you. Seeing his sincerity, Bai Shan smiled and said, we came prepared today. He put down the book basket in his hand and lifted the lid to let him see what was inside. Wei Yu hesitated, these are the paints and things used for painting. Bai Shan smiled after glanced at Man Bao, I am also entrusted by others, and today I have to trouble brother Wei as a reference for me. Wei Yu understood and was surprised, you want to draw me? He is not a beauty, what do you draw him for? Man Bao had already taken out the scroll from his sleeve, unwrapped it and unfolded it to show him, young Master Wei, look at it. Wei Yu looked around and saw that the scroll was opened little by little, and a woman with a sweet smile jumped on the paper. Wei Yu was startled and said with wide eyes, this. Isn't this Princess Changjia? Man Bao smiled and said, Princess Changjia said that she almost forgot what you looked like, so she wanted me to take a look at you on her behalf, but I don't think my eyes are hers, there are still pictures in this world. Is there anything more capable of showing a person's appearance? As it happens, we are also afraid that you will forget what Princess Changjia looks like, so we have drawn a small portrait of the princess for you. Man Bao didn't unfold it all, only let him look at his face. Seeing that his face was red, even his ears and neck were red, he rolled up the scroll, tied it with a rope and handed it to him, winking and saying, young Master Wei can do it. See it in private. Wei Yu took it with a blushing face, and the calmness she faced with the two disappeared. However, he was still stable. Although his face was burning, he still took the painting and bowed. He turned sideways and said, "You two sit first, and I'll make tea for you." Wei Yu turned sideways only to see that there were no tables and chairs here, so he hurriedly turned to the other side to let them sit down, and then turned around holding the painting a little dizzy. Seeing that he just left the guests in the study, Bai Shan and Man Bao couldn't help but look at each other and burst out laughing. Man Bao said, "Young Master Wei's blushing look is quite nice." Bai Shan smiled slightly, then tilted his head and asked, "Does it look good?" Man Bao nodded. Bai Shan frowned. After a while, a servant brought tea and apologized for their son by the way, saying that their son accidentally spilled the tea on his body when he was making tea, so he had to go back to the house to wash and change clothes. "Also please forgive me." Bai Shan and Man Bao looked at each other and both smiled and said they didn't mind at all. When Wei Yu came back, he not only changed into a new set of clothes, but also tied his hair with a jade crown. Although he did not reach the crown, his hair was thick and strong, and he tied it with a jade crown. The obvious face seems to be in the wind. No wonder after so long, they all finished the snacks on the table, drank 2 cups of tea, and went to change their clothes once. Bai Shan coughed lightly, covering the corner of his mouth with a smile, and greeted Wei Yu casually to sit up and give him a reference. Man Bao immediately tidied up the desk and wanted to help Bai Shan to color. Seeing that they didn't show too much surprise at his outfit, Wei Yu breathed a sigh of relief, but at the same time was a little worried that he was not dressed properly. Bai Shan opened the paper he brought and said with a smile, "Brother Wei, please take a seat, or stand, as you wish." Wei Yu was not sitting or standing for a while. Man Bao looked around the room, and simply clicked on the window and said, stand here, the light is the best at the moment, and the window lattices are also beautiful, so I can paint together later." She saw the sword hanging on the wall again. She knew what Chang Yu liked the most, so she stepped forward to look at the sword on the wall and asked, "Can I take it?" Wei Yu smiled and nodded, "It's just my saber, you can take it." Man Bao took it off, and couldn't help but pull it open to take a look, and found that the sword was actually open, and was slightly curious. "Young Master Wei is still in the arena." Wei Yu said with a smile, "It's not enough to travel around the world. It's just that I went out to study before. This is for self-defense." Bai Shan also glanced at Ji Unfeng and said to Man Bao, "When Bai Er and I go to study abroad, our Ji Unfeng will also be opened." Man Bao was slightly envious. I also want to practice swordsmanship." Bai Shan smiled while looking for paint on Wei Yu's clothes. "You, just learn the 2 sets of swordsmanship we taught you." Wei Yu laughed and asked, "Is it taught in school?" "It's not very useful, it's just for physical fitness and good looks. It's swordsmanship, more like sword dance. If you want to defend against the enemy, you have to find someone to teach you in private." Bai Shandao, "My family's Daji knows a lot of swordsmanship. I have always learned from him. Although I dare not say that I am proficient, I can still cope with the study tour." "Who did Brother Wei learn swordsmanship from?" Wei Yu said proudly, "With my father." He smiled and said, "He has been on the battlefield and knows a little bit of boxing." Bai Shan knew that although Wei Ji was an advisor to the former prince, he had also brought some soldiers and horses on the battlefield. Although he couldn't compare with the generals of Li Shangshuyin, he had to teach Wei Yu some self-protection methods. Still more than enough. What's more, their students have to take 1 or 2 guards with them when they travel to study. They really have to work hard to get them to come. They learn Kung Fu just because they want to hurry, so that they won't be too tired, and they have the ability to protect themselves when the guards can't catch up. See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1866. Man Bao had already closed the sword, then let Wei Yu hold it, and carefully adjusted the cuffs for him. She took a few steps back and looked at the window, bathed in the spring sun, her face seemed to be gleaming. The ordinary Wei Yu nodded with satisfaction. Based on what she knew about Chang Yu, if she could see Wei Yu like this with her own eyes, she would also feel good in her heart. Wei Yu didn't have much to think about at this time. It was almost Zhou Man's command and action, but Bai Shan shook his head quietly, feeling that what Princess Changjiao likes is all fancy. Isn't Wei Yu not handsome looking at his homework? Man Bao ran to Bai Shan, saw him spread out the paper, and looked at the paint he had picked out, then turned his head to look at Wei Yu, then picked the paint and ground it to pick out the paint for him. Naturally, Bai Shan was not as careful and thoughtful as Mingde, so he didn't plan to draw this small portrait too finely, but it was just a vivid drawing of the facial features and the clothes on his body. Bai Shan sketched the person in a few strokes, and then began to draw slowly, looking up at Wei Yu from time to time. Man Bao was helping Wei Yu while talking to Wei Yu. Young Master Wei, if you are good at swordsmanship, do you know how to play polo? Wei Yu has also heard that Princess Changjiao likes to play polo. Knowing that Zhou Man was quietly revealing Princess Changjiao's preferences, he smiled embarrassedly and said, I'm not very good at playing horses. The ball, but watching my friends play it requires a lot of riding. Man Bao nodded and asked curiously, what kind of entertainment does young Master Wei like? Besides reading, playing chess, drawing, and writing. Wei Yu opened his mouth, but got stuck for a while. Man Bao understood at a glance that he was gone. Even if she had expected it long ago, she could not help but sigh quietly in her heart, then they two have no common topic. She glanced at Bai Shan, who happened to be looking up at her too. After their eyes met, they looked away tacitly, and Bai Shan continued to lower his head calmly and paint. Standing by the window, Wei Yu, who knew that they were engaged early, fell silent. Man Bao has found a new topic, then do you like to eat? Princess Changjiao especially likes delicious food. Who doesn't like delicious food? But eating and drinking are the same as having fun, so why should you care too much? Delicious delicacies are naturally good, but rough meals are not bad, but Wei Yu didn't say that, but nodded with a smile. Everyone in the world can't live without food and drink, who wouldn't like delicious food? Man Bao seemed to have finally found what they had in common, and said happily, that's great, I don't know what Wei Gongzi likes to eat. Wei Yu said with a smile that she liked two things, and then asked Man Bao what Princess Changjiao likes to eat. Man Bao paused for a while, thought about it for a long time, and finally said, she likes to eat anything delicious. This answer was too broad. Wei Yu blinked and looked at Zhou Man. Man Bao smiled a little embarrassedly with Wei Yu. Bai Shan also thought of Princess Changjiao's preferences, couldn't help but pursed his lips and smiled, looked up at Wei Yu and continued to draw a pen. He didn't want to paint in detail, but it took more than an hour. The servants walked back and forth outside the door twice, wanting to invite them to lunch in front of him, but he didn't dare to disturb him. When Bai Shan finally finished writing, Wei Yu was stiff and numb while standing by the window. He moved slightly first, feeling the numbness on his legs disappeared a lot, and then hung the sword back with a straight face on the wall, then walk over to see the painting. Seeing himself in the painting, Wei Yu was slightly taken aback, and after a while he smiled at Bai Shan, brother Bai drew me better too. Bai Shan smiled and said, Shen Yun is less than 1/10 of brother Wei's. Wei Yu looked at himself in the painting and was amazed, brother Bai is too modest, this painting can become a family heirloom. It is just right to keep it for future generations to pay homage to the ancestors. Bai Shan left the table and cleaned his hands on the shelf. Hearing this, he chuckled and said, Brother Wei likes it, you can leave it to future generations and use it as a tribute in the future. Wei Yu smiled and said, how can this be, this painting is not mine. After he finished speaking, he was stunned for a moment, and his face turned red when he reacted. Man Bao was already laughing and said, isn't the princess's descendants also yours? Bai Shan also smiled. Wei Yu bowed her head a little embarrassedly, and when she turned her head to see the servant standing by the window again, she cleared her throat. The servants outside the door immediately came in and invited them to lunch. Wei Yu also hurriedly asked them to go to the front hall for dinner. Bai Shan dried his hands, nodded with a smile, and went to the front hall with Man Bao. Everyone in the Wei family had eaten by now, and Bai Shan was there, so it was not easy to eat with the female family members, so the three of them had a table alone. While eating, Man Bao paid special attention to what Wei Yu was eating, and found that he was really impartial and ate some of everything. When Man Bao was thinking, he couldn't help but bring out a bad problem, biting his chopsticks and looking at Wei Yu. Bai Shan's foot touched hers lightly under the table, and Man Bao immediately returned to his senses and continued to eat, pretending that nothing had happened. When they left the Wei family with the dried paintings, Bai Shan couldn't help complaining, you haven't cared so much about my preferences. Man Baidao, we grew up together, who doesn't know who? Then I want to ask you, what is your favorite food? Without waiting for Bai Shan to answer, Man Bao said directly, you like to eat fish most, or mandarin fish. Bai Shan opened her mouth, but closed her mouth in the end. Forget it, she was right. They grew up together, and who doesn't know who? But he was still a little unhappy, so the two of them didn't speak all the way. When he got home, Man Bao reached out to him, and Bai Shan reacted for a while before remembering that she was going to take the painting in his hand. His face darkened, he directly patted the rolled up painting on her hand, turned around and left. Daji led the horse and stood aside, and when the young master was far away, he asked Man Bao, why is the young master angry? Man Bao raised his head and snorted, took the painting and turned away, angry, who wouldn't? Daji looked at Man Bao, who was going to the other side angrily. After a while, he turned to look at the other side. Sure enough, he saw a figure standing there on the floor tiles at the corner. Daji saw that the figure paused for a long time before leaving, then shook his head slightly, and put the horse to the stable. Man Bao took the painting back to his room, and then remembered that her book basket was still in the study in the yard over there, but she was not on good terms with others, and she couldn't go there, so she just put the painting on it. On the table, decided to talk about it later. Zhou Lejun heard the clanging sound of the next room, and could not help but ran out and asked, little aunt, what are you doing? Man Bao, who could drop a book on the ground, picked it up and replied, nothing, I'm looking for a book. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1867. Zhou Lejun glanced into the room, turned decisively and ran to find Li Ru. Don't ask your auntie questions, and ask other gentlemen when you go to school tomorrow. Seeing Zhou Liru looking up at her suspiciously, she said, little aunt is in a bad mood now, I don't know what's wrong. It was obvious that Zhou Man was not alone in the bad mood. After a while, Bai Erlang rushed into the main courtyard and knocked on Man Bao's door. Before Man Bao opened the door, he shouted, Zhou Man, you go and judge us. He got angry outside, come back to me to vent. Man Bao opened the door and asked him curiously, why did he get angry with you? Bai Erlang pulled out his clothes and showed her, he said he wanted to practice swordsmanship with me, but he cut my clothes and accidentally kicked me. He didn't even admit that he was looking for me to vent his anger. Bai Erlang stared at her and asked, didn't you go to Wei Yu? Who made him angry? Man Bao's eyes were a little erratic. Bai Erlang understood, did you quarrel? He was so angry that his face flushed with rage, you guys are arguing to get angry at me? I'm your junior brother, not your son. Man Bao closed the door with a slap and left a sentence, I'll change my clothes, you can go back. Bai Erlang opened his mouth wide and couldn't help knocking on the door several times, shouting, open the door. That is impossible. Man Bao is hesitating whether or not to go to Bai Shan, but she doesn't want to be submissive. It's obviously his fault, why should she be submissive? Hey, what did he do wrong? Bai Shan was also sitting on the steps holding the sword in a daze. Mr. Zhuang walked not far in front of him, just glanced at him and shook his head and left. He secretly said with his hands behind his back, the children seem to have really grown up. The two of them didn't stay up until the evening. In the evening, Bai Shan took the initiative to go to Man Bao and invited her to have dinner together. Although Man Bao prefers to eat the food cooked by his sister-in-law, he still agrees, so he and Bai Shan go there for dinner. Mrs. Lu obviously also knew about the two children's quarrel in the afternoon. As soon as she saw Man Bao, she smiled and waved, holding her back and said, if Shan Bao bullies you, tell your grandmother, and grandmother will teach him a lesson for you. Man Bao glanced at Bai Shan, then bowed his head a little embarrassedly, and explained, he didn't bully me. Bai Shan quietly breathed a sigh of relief. After eating, he took her back to the study and poured a cup of tea for himself and her. I shouldn't have lost my temper with you today, I will apologize to you. Man Bao took the tea, you said this, I didn't force you. Bai Shan couldn't help laughing, nodded, and said, yes, you didn't force me. Only then did Man Bao drink happily, and then he whispered, actually, I am also wrong. When Bai Erlang came over while nibbling on the fruit after dinner, he saw the two of them apologizing to each other. He stood at the door and watched for a while. Seeing that they hadn't seen him, he coughed twice, so hard that he almost broke his throat. Chopped. Bai Erlang covered his throat and couldn't help but coughed a second time, and his throat was relieved. When he saw that both of them finally looked at him, he raised his chin and asked, it's all over for you to apologize to each other. You haven't apologized to me yet. Man Bao and Bai Shan looked at each other, then turned around and bowed to him, how about a bow with you? Bai Erlang hummed, waved his hand and said, forget it, I'll forgive you all with difficulty. Next time you guys have to quarrel again, just fight it yourself, don't get angry with me. The two couldn't help but say, we never fight. It's okay to say this to others. Tell me, do you think I'll believe it? Bai Shan and Man Bao thought about it too, so they put it away without explaining it. Bai Erlang asked the two of them curiously, why are you quarreling this time? Man Bao and Bai Shan looked at each other, and finally she said, how do I know? Bai Shan. He turned his head aside. Man Bao said, okay, because he is jealous. When Bai Erlang heard this, he became excited and asked, whose vinegar is it to eat? Still Man Bao said, Wei Yu's. Bai Erlang frowned, what's so good about his vinegar? He turned his head to look at Bai Shan up and down, and asked, does he have more knowledge than you? Bai Shan, am I the kind of person who is jealous of the virtuous? Then why are you jealous of him? Bai Erlang asked in confusion, is he more handsome than you, or better than your family background? If there are other things about him that can attract Man Bao? But no matter how powerful he is, he can still have Yang Shui. Are brother and senior brother Tang powerful? You don't even eat their vinegar, you eat his. Bai Shan, don't guess, is Man Bao that kind of person? Brother Yang and brother Tang are married. What does it sound like? Wei Yu is also engaged. By the way, there's still me. No matter how bad it is, there is still yin or. Why don't you eat our vinegar? Bai Shanfei glanced at him, turned his head and said to Man Bao, I didn't take his jealousy, I just think you don't care enough about me. You care so much about Wei Yu for Chang Yu, why don't you care about me? Man Bao felt that he was making trouble unreasonably, I asked Wei Yu those questions because Chang Yu didn't know anything, but don't I know all your questions? Am I going to ask you nonsense? What do you like to do in your spare time? What snacks and dishes do you like to eat on weekdays? Bai Erlang interjected, I know, he likes to eat fish, and also like. Shut up, Bai Shan and Man Bao turned their heads together to stop him, and then Man Bao looked at Bai Shan and said, look, he already knows, can I still not know? Why waste time asking again? You once, are you bored? Bai Shan, then can you ask something else? What? Bai Shan opened his mouth and found that he couldn't think of it, so he discouraged, it seems that childhood sweethearts are not good, I have nothing to say with you. Man Bao. Bai Erlang, who was talking outside my door early in the morning and woke me up. Man Bao has already directly defined him as being unreasonable, so he turned to leave. Bai Shan gave Bai Erlang a sideways glance and turned to see her off. Turning the corridor, they didn't go straight forward, but went around the garden before returning to the main courtyard. Bai Shan said to her, you should not get involved too much in other people's emotional affairs, Princess Changjio and Wei. Jade's personalities are too different, and the husband and wife may not be compatible in the future. Man Baidao, I think feelings can be cultivated, and people can be changed. Not to mention Wei Yu, Princess Changjio is only 16. I think if they are willing to work hard, they will not be able to play together in the future. At least we can treat each other with respect. Bai Shan was very curious, why have you been so concerned about their relationship recently? Man Bao said, I am treating Princess Changjio. Princess Changjio is also ill. Man Bao whispered, yes, but it's not serious, it's a disease of my heart. I'm not very good at treating this disease now. Fortunately, Chang Yu is willing to cooperate with me in treatment, so I want to try it with her. That's what it means to try. It turned out to be for treatment, and Bai Shan's heart felt at ease. See you at 11:30. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1868. I said earlier that there are not many things like this today. However, Man Bao could sense that Bai Shan seemed to be in a much better mood. She glanced at him strangely, wondering why he had gotten better again. She sighed in her heart, and for the first time couldn't help but talk to Keek about her relationship with Bai Shan. As expected, the book is right, the heart of a man, the needle at the bottom of the sea, is really too hard to figure out. Coco. Man Bao didn't get a response, but she didn't care, and Bai Shan sent her back to the room in a good mood. Because the misunderstanding between the two was resolved, they were both in a good mood. After washing up, they fell asleep quickly without any worries. Tomorrow they will get up early and enter the palace. Originally, they got up early enough, but Thursday and Zhou Dalin got up even earlier. The two woke up Wu Lang, who was unwilling to get up, and dragged him out of the city together. Hearing the movement in the next room, Saturday Lang turned over and said happily, thanks, I have to go to the restaurant after dawn, otherwise I have to go too. They arrived at the gate of the square by the time, and when the curfew was over, the gate of the square would open, then the inner city gate, and then the outer city gate. The three brothers drove a carriage out of the inner city gate. When they arrived at the outer city gate, the city gate had not yet opened, but there were already a lot of people waiting in and out of the city. Those who go out of the city want to leave the capital to do business, most of which are business trips, while those who enter the city are mostly villagers living near the capital except for business trips. When the time was up, an official shouted loudly, and everyone held their breaths and waited for the guards to come down from the city gate tower, and then lined up to slowly open the city gate. Hearing the sound of the city gates opening, Wu Wulang's drowsiness disappeared at once, and he climbed out of the carriage with wide eyes to see. After a while, the city gate opened, and people in line began to enter and exit the city gate in an orderly manner. He couldn't help sighing, "Big brother, Fourth brother, did you see it? I said the city gate looks good when it opens, right? The shock on Thursday Lang's face disappeared, and he nodded. It's very majestic, as expected of the capital, even more magnificent than outside the gate. Joe Dallin patted the horse's butt and said, okay, let's get out of the city quickly, it's time for Manbao and the others to get up. There are quite a lot of people entering and leaving the city gate, but it is estimated that the three of them are the brothers who went out of the city to dig wild vegetables this morning. After driving out of the city, they didn't go very far. After walking for a while, they turned to a small road. In my memory, there are fields on both sides of this road. Yesterday, Lang went out of the city to see it. There are a lot of wild vegetables nearby. If it wasn't for the princess's food, Shiro would have gone back yesterday. Thursday Lang stared at him, but it was so dark that he couldn't see anything, so he could only roughly estimate the distance, and then said, okay, just stop here. So Joe Dallin pulled the horse, and the three got out of the car. Weevo Lang took the lantern out of the car and lit it for Thursday. Thursday Lang said while nodding, there is no shortage of oil at home now. I said go early, you are not willing. When Chuyo Lang lit the fire, he slapped the back of his hand with a snap, and looked at the blood on the back of his hand by the light of the fire box, and shouted, did you see it, did you see it? I was bitten by a mosquito while I was lighting the lamp. I don't know how much oil the blood is worth, and all this blood is eaten by meat. Joe Dallin snatched the fire book and lantern in his hand, quickly lit 2 lanterns with the help of Weevo Lang, and stuffed a lantern into Shiro Lang's hand and said, you can be content, it's not like it was before. Smeared and worked. Wu Lang was already looking around with a lantern, and soon found the wild vegetable he was looking for. He called Joe Dallin, and Joe Dallin stepped forward to dig and pick. Thursday Lang also held up the lantern and looked around. He basically didn't dig it, and he just picked it or pulled it when he saw it. Seeing that he was so serious, Wu Lang said to Joe Dallin, big brother, fourth brother must have a plan, otherwise why would he be so concerned about the princess? I know that the fourth child wants to do business with the princess. Not to mention Weevo Lang. Thursday Lang was stunned, and quickly turned around and asked, how did big brother know? Joe Dallin said calmly, your sister-in-law told me. What's wrong with sister-in-law? Chuyo Lang remembered something and shouted, it must be Manbao, right? I knew that, if I told her not to tell others, she would be able to spread the word to everyone. Joe Dallin spoke for Manbao, not everyone knows it, it's just your sister-in-law and your parents. He thought about it and then said, oh, it seems that Liz Hong and Li Wei also know about it. I don't know if they told Li Xiu and Li Guo, but Li Jun must know, so Li Ru also knows. Thura. Friday Lang, is it just me and Lao Lu who don't know? Joe Dallin reassured him, you and Lao Lu have been in the restaurant all day. It's normal not to know, but your wife and Lao Liu's wife should have heard of it. Maybe they didn't have time to tell you. Thursday Lang swayed, this is still only. The whole family knows it, right? He couldn't help but mutter, I'll give one less warning, just one less warning. Thursday Lang remembered something, lowered his voice and asked, then my daughter-in-law. I must have known it, Joe Dallin said firmly, I just don't mention it. Thursday Lang was a little dissatisfied again, why didn't you mention it? Joe Dallin said as a matter of course, Manbao and Li Jun didn't agree, the money is in their hands, so what's the point of not mentioning it? This is to make sure that Shiro's arm can't twist Manbao and Li Jun's thighs. Joe Dallin said, now my parents can listen to Li Jun's words, let alone Manbao's words. Shiro slumped his shoulders, then you still follow me out to dig wild vegetables? Joe Dallin said with a smile, in the end, it was the little sister who promised others. That's the princess. It's not good for them to eat the food for the night. They are satisfied with the food, and they can take care of the little sister in the palace in the future. He said, the palace is their home, and we can rest assured that my little sister has more friends in it. Okay, Thursalang has been hit hard now and doesn't have much hope for his pearl business. With a sigh, he held up the lantern and pulled all the other wild vegetables he could see. At this time, the wild vegetables are the tenderest, almost none of them are old, and there are many more. As long as you find one, you can find a piece along the way. The three quickly picked a lot, and they probably left quickly after they had 2 baskets. It was already a little bright now, but the morning light had not yet been seen. When they drove the carriage back home, Mrsgn had already boiled the water. She and her 2 sisters-in-law picked up the wild vegetables together. Mrsgn also helped, and quickly selected the wild vegetables and washed them. After the water boiled, Mr. Chien poured it directly into it. The speed was very fast, and only then did Manbao get up from the bed in a daze. While she got up and put on clothes with her eyes half closed, she secretly said, "In fact, living in the palace in spring is not bad, at least you don't need to get up early to enter the palace." It was only at this time that Manbao felt that there was a benefit to taking a bath without interruption. In the last half hour, ask for the remaining monthly passes, as well as book friends who have monthly passes, they will be cleared if you keep them. Finally, good night everyone. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1869. When Manbao packed up and touched the kitchen, Xiao Qian had already prepared their breakfast. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang probably smelled the smell and didn't eat at Aunt Rong's side, so they came here directly. Xiao Qian got up early today, and there was a stone mill in the house, so he made soy milk and tofu. She directly boiled soy milk for them to drink, and when she saw Bai Shan and the others came over, she smiled, and each gave them a large bowl and asked them to add sugar themselves. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang obediently greeted the olds Hu Tuqian Shi and others, and then sat next to Zhou Man, reaching for the meatloaf in the middle of the table together. Manbao took a bite of meat pie and soy milk, and said to the 2 of them, "Bring a meat pie for Chang Yu, Mingda will probably eat it too, so bring one for her." Bai Shan glanced at the meat patties on the plate, nodded, there were quite a few, and they had nothing to say. Mr. Chien has soaked the blanched wild vegetables in water, chopped them and mixed them, and then put them in a beautiful plate. This plate is still a reward that was full of treasures. It had been in the warehouse before and was reluctant to use. Old Joe thought that it could be used as a reward by the people in the palace. Could it be an ordinary plate? But to prepare food for the princess, he always felt that the rough pottery at home might not be able to reach the countertop, so he rummaged in the warehouse and found this set of china. Yes, if someone who is particular about it breaks one piece, the whole set will be useless. Old Joe Tuden took out this plate. At this time, Mrsgn put the wild vegetables on it, because the wild vegetables were not very good looking, so he struggled for a while. But she still put the wild vegetables on it, and then put the plate in the food box. Because Manbao said she wanted to bring pancakes, she took another stoneware plate to hold the meatloaf, and when Lao Zhutu saw it, he hurriedly stopped him, "Such a beautiful food box, plus such a beautiful plate in the middle stoneware plates, how ugly." He said, "Isn't there a small bamboo basket at home, it is specially used for turning steamed buns and cakes, take that package." Although bamboo is also cheap, he sees that the in-laws next door often use that to hold things. Occasionally, the 2 families sit together to eat together. They all use small bamboo baskets and small baskets to store steamed buns and non-cakes. Sometimes there are also bamboo woven things on the shelves of the treasures, which look particularly beautiful. Manbao nodded in agreement. There wasn't much in Lao Zhou's house, but there were enough bamboo weaving things. Xiao Qian quickly found a flat basket in the shape of a flower, and put several meat patties on it. When Man Bao saw it, he hurriedly stopped him. "It's all right, sister-in-law, they won't be able to eat if you bring too much." Xiao Qian said with a smile, "If you meet young Master Yin at the gate of the palace, you can give him a taste." Xiao Qian also likes Yin Or, who is white, well-behaved and polite. Man Bao shook his head and said, "He never enters through the palace gate, so he can't meet him, but he might meet Lu Huan." "Forget it, bring him one." Xiao Qian counted them, and she took 6. The noble people didn't have much appetite, so she guessed it was enough, so she also put the basket into the food box. Seeing that the 3 of Man Bao were drinking soy milk fragrantly, she thought about it, took 2 bamboo tubes and filled them with soy milk, and hung them on the food box. Man Bao and the others had enough to eat and drink, so they carried the food box and got into the car together. The Zhou family and the Bai family sent people to the door as usual, and watched them get in the car and instructed them as usual, after entering the palace, "Be obedient and don't be naughty. If you have anything, you can ask Mr. Zhuang and the family to pass a message, you know." These words must be repeated every 10 days when they enter the palace. Bai Shan and the others are tired of hearing them, but they still nod their heads. Daji waited for them to finish talking as usual, then beat the horse and left. Lao Zhutu and the others watched the guards escorting the car away, and then turned to talk to Mrs. Lu. The two gossip for a while, and then they go back to their respective courtyards. Bai Dalan also takes his wife's hand back to the courtyard. Every 10 days, he will take his wife back to the Zhou residence for 2 or 3 days, and sometimes he just lives here. Although Changqing Lane is more comfortable, they also like to be lively, don't they? The carriage reached the imperial city at the speed limit without any hassle, only to slow down when it saw the gate of the palace. Chang Yu, who had been waiting in the palace gate for a long time, saw the Bai family's carriage, and immediately became happy. Seeing that the curtain of the carriage was lifted, she immediately waved her hand excitedly, and called out, "Manbao, Manbao." Manbao also waved at her happily, and the carriage stopped before jumping out of the carriage, running up to greet her across the 4 guards. "I brought you something delicious, and the meat patties that my sister-in-law brought." "Woolen cloth." Chang Yu said, "I didn't have breakfast, so I got up early and waited for you here." After speaking, he pulled Mingda and said, "Mingda too." Because it was spring, Mingda wore a veil covering his nose and mouth, and he smiled helplessly when he was pulled by Chang Yu. Bai Shan lifted the food box down, and was stopped by the guards sandwiched between the 2 sides with expressionless hands, wanting to check things. Bai Shan hesitated for a while, but still opened the food box for them to see, trying to see if he could see it. When the guards saw the wild vegetables in the food box, the blue veins on their foreheads twitched, and he asked, "What is this?" Man Bao innocently said, "Wild vegetables." The guards said ruthlessly, "Things that cannot be seen in their original state cannot be sent into the palace." Man Bao knew that this wild vegetable was chopped up like this, who could recognize it? She then waved to Chang Yu from the air and told her, "Come out quickly, eat before entering." The guards stared, how could this be? Chang Yu picked up her skirt and was about to run out, but it was okay for the guards to stop it for a while, and it was okay not to stop it. Mingda said to them, "We're right at the door, don't worry, we won't run away." Because it was Princess Mingda who spoke, and Zhou Man himself was a famous doctor, they let it go with one eye closed. Chang Yu took Mingda and ran out, standing beside the palace gate, sniffing the wild vegetable in front of the guards, wrinkling his nose and saying, "It seems a little sour." Man Bao took the chopsticks from the food box and gave them to her, and said, "It's sour, and a little sweet. It's very appetizing, you can try it." Chang Yu looked at the wild vegetables with some unsightly colors, and carefully put a small chopstick into his mouth. When he put it in his mouth, he felt a little sour. When he chewed it lightly, it made a crunching sound. With a slight sweetness, and the fragrance of wild vegetables spread to the tip of the tongue, Chang Yu's eyes brightened, and he nodded repeatedly, "It's very appetizing." After saying that, he took a big chopstick and ate it, and then said to Mingda, "You can taste it, it's very wild." Mingda knew it was delicious from the look of her, and she also took a pair of chopsticks from Man Bao and tasted it together. She tasted it carefully, nodded and said, "It's not bad, it's strange, I don't seem to have eaten it before." Vegetable. Man Bao said, "Of course, this is a wild vegetable." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1870. Man Bao pointed to the still hot meat patty and said, "This is also made by my sister-in-law, can you try it?" Chang Yu sniffed, without thinking about it. She stretched out her hand and took a bite, it was soft but firm, and she just bit into a little bit of minced meat. Her eyes lit up, and she nodded to Mingda, "Very good. It's delicious, try it now." Mingda also took a small bite, smiled, nodded and said, "It's not bad, it's not the same as the taste in the palace. Of course, this meat filling is mixed with the sauce made by my sister-in-law, and it's very delicious." The guards couldn't help but slanted their gazes. They didn't respond when the princesses were eating the wild vegetables, but when they were eating the meat pie, the aroma kept getting in front of their noses, and they couldn't control their eyes. The two guards who stood closest to the two princesses swallowed involuntarily, and then forced themselves to look away to look at the young masters who were running towards them. Zhao Liaolang and the others ran closer to confirm that they were right. The ones standing in front of the palace gate were indeed Princess Changjiao and Princess Mingda. Zhao Liaolang jumped off the horse first, stepped forward, and saluted, "I have seen two princesses." Mingda and Chang Yu returned half salute and called their cousin. Zhao Liaolang looked at the meatloaf in their hands, then looked at the plate in Zhou Man's hand and the basket in Bai Shan's hand, and couldn't help but blink. "This is..." Mingda said embarrassedly, "This is our breakfast." Zhao Liaolang, "When will the princess's breakfast be served at the gate of the palace? And what was that ugly dish? It doesn't look delicious." But Chang Yu was very happy to eat, one bite of meat pie and one bite of wild vegetables. She had a big appetite, and taught Mingda to eat like this. "It's not greasy at all, and it's very appetizing." Zhao Liaolang could only turn his head to look at Bai Shan, hoping he could give an explanation. Bai Shan looked at Zhao Liaolang and calmly moved away, ignoring him. Zhao Liaolang. He was about to ask something else, when Lu Huan's carriage arrived, and before his carriage stopped, he jumped out of the carriage and shouted, "I smell meat patties, are you eating meat patties?" He jumped out of the carriage and realized that it wasn't Bai Shan and Zhou Man that he had imagined eating the meat pie, but the two princesses. He stopped immediately, daring not to be rude. Because he had enough, Man Bao took a patty from the basket and handed it to him. Lu Huan smiled and said, "It's not good." That being said, he still took it. When Chang Yu saw it, she was unhappy. She used to protect food, and she and Lu Huan were not familiar with each other. This cake was brought to her and Mingda by Man Bao. So after taking a bite of the meat pie, she kept eating wild vegetables, and called Mingda, "Eat this first, and we will enter the palace after eating." Wild vegetables cannot be brought into the palace, but meat patties are fine. Growing up together since childhood, Mingda could not know what she was thinking, smiled and nodded, and went to eat wild vegetables. Lu Huan was also greedy for wild vegetables, but after looking at Mingda and Chang Yu, he did not dare to speak. There were more and more students coming to the gate of the palace. Feng Zonping and Yi Xiang also arrived. The two and other students first bowed to Princess Mingda, Princess Changjiao, and then they had to pass the inspection while watching. Go to the palace. That's why Zhao Liaolang and Lu Huan stayed, but one stayed to watch the two princess cousins, and the other stayed to eat meatloaf. Lu Yu was the last two to arrive. After watching for a while, he couldn't help but say to Zhao Liaolang, "You just look at it like this? You don't know if the food outside the palace is clean, so you dare to eat it for the princess." Bai Shan just lifted his eyelids slightly. Zhao Liaolang said angrily, "Zhou Man is an imperial physician, what is there that she dares to bring?" Chang Yu, who was struggling to eat, nodded again and again, swallowed what was in his mouth, and then said, "Who are you, and what does what we eat have nothing to do with you?" Just as Lu Yu was about to say something, his face suddenly changed, and he lowered his head and whispered, "I am also worried about His Highness. After all, there are many diseases in spring." Chang Yu snorted and was about to reply, but Man Bao tugged at her sleeve. She turned to look at her, and saw that she was bowing her head, holding a plate in her hand, and then bent over to salute, "Meet your Royal Highness." Except for the silent guards at the gate of the palace, everyone bowed and saluted. The crown prince frowned, and then looked at Mingda and Chang Yu, his eyes gliding over the chopsticks and meat patties in their hands, his brows furrowed even tighter. "Aunt Fan said that you won't listen to the persuasion to go out of the palace and make a fool of yourself? You have tokens. Are you going to leave the palace?" Chang Yu lowered his head and didn't dare to speak. Mingda smiled and said, "Brother Prince, we didn't go out of the palace, we just had something to eat at the entrance of the palace." "What is the style of dining in a large audience?" the prince asked. "Can't it be used in the palace?" Mingda complained, "The guards will not let this dish in." The guards didn't change their faces, and they didn't hesitate at all. The prince took a look at the wild vegetables in Zhou Man's hand, but he didn't blame the guards. The plate of vegetables looked dark and a little red, which was different from the vegetables he had seen before, so he wouldn't give it to him. He took a step forward, looked at it, frowned and asked Zhou Man, "What kind of dish is this?" "Man Bao, wild vegetables." "Wild vegetables are wild vegetables, why are you still so uncertain? There are several kinds. The name I called your highness may not have been heard before." The prince turned his head and asked Mingda and Chang Yu, "Is it delicious?" The voice didn't fluctuate much. Chang Yu wasn't sure whether he was angry or not, and he wasn't even sure if he was asking them literally or in another way, so he hesitated and didn't dare to answer. Mingda has already nodded affirmatively and said, "It's delicious, brother, try it." After saying that, she gave him the chopsticks in her hand. The prince didn't mind that it was used by his younger sister. He took it and ate a pair of chopsticks directly. The taste was slightly sour and slightly sweet. The prince raised his eyebrows slightly, and it was quite crisp. Crowd. Man Bao and Bai Shan Bai Erlang raised their hearts slightly, watching the prince take the plate in her hand and eat directly. With chopsticks in his hand, Chang Yu felt infinite sadness in his heart, and he couldn't grab the wild vegetables from the crown prince. She could only take a sullen bite of the meatloaf. The prince raised his head to look at her when he heard the voice, his eyes turned to the food box in Bai Shan's hand, the meatloaf in it. Chang Yu's intuition is not good. The prince has already poured all the wild vegetables on the plate into his mouth. After chewing slowly, he wiped his mouth, and then put the plate and chopsticks into the food box. Before putting them in, he took out the vegetables. The little bamboo basket said to Chang Yu and Mingda, "Okay, you can enter the palace." He pointed to Aunt Fan who was standing inside the palace gate and said, "If it wasn't for the solitary encounter, it would be Aunt Chang or the Queen Mother who came to the palace gate now. Don't stay outside the gate for so long if you don't want to be punished." Chang Yu stared at the bamboo basket in his hand and couldn't help pulling Laminda's sleeve. Seeing how pitiful she was, Mingda reached out and took a meat pie from the bamboo basket in the prince's hands, nodded and said, "I see, goodbye eldest brother." She and Man Bao blinked, then dragged Chang Yu away, and only after entering the palace gate did she give her the meat pie in her hand. Only then was Chang Yu satisfied. While eating the meat pie from the other hand, he said, "By the way, Man Bao seems to have mentioned that she brought us soy milk." Mingda said, 2 meat patties are enough, you just ate a lot of wild vegetables, don't eat too much in the morning. See you at 9.